It is almost 2018, and all I can say about that is thank God.
I am so happy.
I am
about
so ready to tell this year goodbye.
Get the F out, 2017. You did nothing but suck so much.
Except for Wonder Woman and a few other bright spots. But, mostly. So here's the deal with Popperation, though. We have an announcement.
We do. We're going to call it a season.
Yeah. So this is the end of season 1. It's not the end of Popperation. We're coming back for season 2. We'll let you know when that's going to be.
Oh, yeah.
Probably, I'm thinking February, March.
That's my guess.
I think we're going to take a substantial break. We might see some changes.
Yes.
Not in the lineup. I will be back. Stacey will be back.
But we're just gonna reevaluate, see what was working, what wasn't working, see what we can do for us to have fun, obviously, because that's our number one priority. But also to continue to be entertaining and interesting.
Yeah.
To anybody who is giving of their precious time to listen to us yip yap. But yes, we're going to come back in 2018, and that's a good thing.
Yep. I'm looking forward to it. So have a wonderful new year.
Yes, for sure.
Have a fantastic January. If you subscribe to Popperation right now, as soon as we come back in season 2, those episodes will just download on your phone or machine or whatever it is you use to listen.
Correct. And follow us on Facebook and Twitter because you'll certainly be kept abreast of what's going on. I said abreast. Is that wrong?
No.
Is that politically incorrect?
No, consent is sexy. It's good.
Okay. So, happy New Year.
From your pop surgeons, Eric.
And Stacey.
When the chaos of popular culture makes your brain hurt, you really need relief in the form of a transfusion of analysis and humor. It's time for a Popperation. Join hosts Eric and Stacey as they dissect popular culture one bloody organ at a time. It's just what the doctor ordered.
It's Popperation. I'm Stacey.
I'm Eric, and today we are talking about a movie called Wag the Dog.
Happy anniversary. How old is it?
20 years old. This movie came out in the very, very end of 1997. It was one of those, hey, we might be up for some awards, so let's release ourselves right at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, if you go, so when I was looking for this movie to watch again for prep for the show, a lot of places said 98. But in fact, I did look, and it was like December 29th or something.
Exactly. I think it's the 24th or something like that.
Yeah. So it was definitely, it knew it had some Oscar bait. It did get nominated for a couple of Oscars. Dustin Hoffman was nominated for Best Leading Actor, and Hilary, Henkin, and David Mamet wrote the screenplay.
I remember that when it came out, that whole thing of David Mamet, who's obviously for many people know him as a playwright.
Yes.
But he's also done lots of TV and he's done movies, a lot of movies as well. But I remember that being a big sell.
Yeah.
That was David Mamet's.
Yeah, and he was nominated for adapted screenplay. They adapted this from a book called American Hero. The author's name eludes me, but it's neither of them. So they both, I guess, read this book and liked it and adapted it for the screen. So the cast for this thing is amazing. Just great people.
Pretty impressive.
From top to bottom. So top of the credits, Dustin Hoffman plays Stanley, a Hollywood producer who is at the heart of a lot of the machinations, the hijinks of this film. Robert De Niro plays Conrad, who is a political strategist. It's kind of like a fixer.
Yep, he's like Olivia Pope.
Yeah, so he gets brought in when there's a crisis, and there's a crisis going on. We'll get to the plot in a minute. Anne Heche plays Winifred Ames. Now, was anybody named Winifred in 1997?
Well, I mean, my mom had a friend named Winnie who knitted some really nice baby blankets for my children.
Okay, how old was Winnie?
She was about 60.
Okay. I don't know that there's a whole lot of Winifreds. I mean, unless...
if you're getting named Winifred, chances are you're getting named after a family friend.
Okay.
or a relative.
Or Hilary, Henkin, and David Mamet knew somebody named Winifred and decided to get their revenge.
Wait, but I'm curious. Was that part originally supposed to be a man?
It was.
Okay, maybe that's why it was a Fred or something, and they said, let's change it to Winifred.
I guess. I don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah. So the role that Anne Heche played was originally written to be a man, and I'm so glad they changed that.
Oh, thank you, God.
I mean,
it would have been so man.
Yeah, if it had been De Niro and Hoffman and a dude, a young guy who was playing this role of the role was a presidential advisor, like someone on the president's staff and kind of the PR communications, probably heavily involved in the campaign as well as the running of the country. If it had been three guys on that plane, there's a great scene with the three of them on the plane. It just would have been so testosterone heavy. It's
also because of the nature of the scandal that they're trying to avoid.
Yes,
it adds a little bit of cynicism. To the fact that it's a woman she's completely into it. I mean, she's like totally on board. She doesn't question anything. And that's another thing that's funny about the character. She doesn't blink.
No.
Every time a new idea is put out there is no conscience kind of moment.
No, there's no conscience kind of moment, but there is is that going to work? Really? I mean, she is kind of the voice of reason, but it's not about, so let's put a pin in that for a moment.
Okay.
When we get to the plot, we'll return to this idea. Briefly, we're just going to go through the rest of the cast list really quick. Dennis Leary plays a guy called the Fad King.
And again, I will tell you, I was surprised to see him there because I was thinking 20 years ago he was pretty big, but maybe it was just on the comic circuit. I'd seen him a lot stand up.
Had the Ref come out?
I don't know. I think it's about the same time, though.
Okay. I like The Ref. That was a great movie.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Judy Davis just does it for me.
She's a very good actress, but meh. And I think it's too soon for us to bring up a Kevin Spacey movie.
All right. Hashtag too soon. Willie Nelson is in this movie.
That was funny.
That
was perfect.
Him. Yes.
It was perfect.
Yeah.
Here's what's funny about him. So I'm looking at him. Okay, that was in 1997. I think I've seen recent pictures. He looks exactly the same.
Well, yes. It's kind of like Keith Richards. He's always looked really old.
Is it the drugs that does?
I think he prematurely aged. I don't think he looks great for his age. I think he looked really crappy for his age back then, and he's just caught up.
Okay.
Basically. But he's very funny in this. Doesn't have a lot to say, but he's just,
but the whole idea is that this producer guy,
brings in a folk singer because he needs a folk singer.
He needs someone who can write a song fast.
So Andrea Martin plays Liz, who is kind of Dennis Leary's right-hand woman. She's a great character actress. She's all over the place now. She's in Difficult People. She's
in a TV series, and I actually enjoy that. It's very cute. It's finally getting its feet, and I'm really enjoying it. She's very good in it. But here's the thing. Again, another person that I was surprised to see her in this small role.
Oh, I wasn't.
She was huge on SCTV.
Yeah.
And had done, so many things.
But here's the deal. Barry Levinson, who's directing this thing, calls you up and says, hey, there's a movie I'm making. Dustin, you don't even have to say Hoffman, is on board. De Niro, you don't even have to say Robert, is on board. You'll have scenes with both of them. It's a quick shoot. Do you want to do it? You say yes. You'll do it for scale. I mean, just for the fun of it, know. And, David Mamet wrote the script. I mean, it's just like, it's one of those things, of course you do it.
It was, maybe some favors were called in. Because you still have another one that somebody else you haven't said yet.
Yeah, but I mean, favor, I think they did. How much fun does that sound?
No, I mean, if David Mamet said we have a show and we want you to play a part that's on screen for 30 seconds, I'll be honest, I'd do it.
Yeah, so we have this set. It's an airplane. It's going to be you and Anne Heche and Robert De Niro and Dustin Hoffman around a table. What do you say, Woody Harrelson? Do you want to be in this? You say yes.
And you've already, and you're alrety a big hit because you've done a lot of stuff.
I think he'd already been nominated for an Oscar.
I think he'd done Born on the U.S. What that religion, that patriotic one he did.
I just remember People versus Larry Flint. Isn't that what he got his Oscar
that's what I'm thinking of. But he also did that killer one with Juliette Lewis.
Natural Born Killers.
That one.
Yep.
I think he'd already done those.
Yeah, no, he was already he was edgy. He was not just Woody from Cheers.
And he's not in the opening credits, so you don't know.
Yeah, I think that was a surprise to audiences at the time. I think because they talk about his character a lot before he shows up, and so when he shows up, and it's like, oh, that's Woody Harrelson, and I like I usually when I do prep for these shows, I'll go on IMDb and I'll check out the cast and then I'll watch the movie. So I knew he was coming. It wasn't a shock, but I'd still kind of forgotten. And when he showed up, it was still kind of like, oh, that's Woody fucking Harrelson, you know? So it was fun.
Yeah.
And I think probably if you saw this in the theater in 97, it was even more fun. Kirsten Dunst is in this movie as a young actress. She was young.
This was before Spider-Man. This was before
Virgin Suicides. Post Interview with the Vampire. She wasn't that young.
Yes, she was
a teenager.
She was still working and doing that transition that you do from child actor to adult. But I get why she was in this.
It's a small role, but she acquits herself very well, and it's a pivotal role because there's an image that you will not forget. That she's involved in. And then finally, I just had to put in a plug because he's one of my favorites. William H. Macy is in this movie.
He's not a surprise to me because he will do all sorts of little bitty parts, and also you just see him show up every once in a while in some random thing, and he brings a gravitas, and he takes it so seriously, even when he's doing a comic. You talk about an underrated. We've talked about Kevin Kline being underrated. William H. Macy, I think, is underrated. William
H. Macy does not have, he can play whatever it is you want him to play. So it's not to say that he's, frightening looking. He doesn't have the face of a leading man. He's not pretty.
He's not a pretty boy.
But I bet he could play someone suave and attractive. If that's what it called for, he could act it and you'd probably believe it.
Well, I think if John Malkovich, I think we've talked about that before, how he did in Valmont and blew me away. Yeah. And then when I saw him in real life, I'm like, ew. I think that I think William H. Macy is that same caliber of actor who is a chameleon, who can do all sorts of things. Yep. He also has great comic timing. Yes. But he plays an FBI? Is he FBI or CIA? He's one of those guys.
And he has a scene where he really has to go toe-to-toe with Robert De Niro and not be intimidated by Robert De Niro. So you're not going to pull somebody off the street and say, oh, by the way, you need to not be intimidated by it. I haven't acted in a long time. If somebody said, here, be in this scene, your job is to not be intimidated by Robert De Niro, I would fail. As would a lot of, because it's like, oh my God, it's Robert De Niro. So here's and then directed by Barry Levinson. Right. Avalon, a number of wonderful, wonderful films. Yeah. Here's the basic plot rundown. We have a president. It's 11 days before a presidential election. He is accused, and again, there's no reason to not believe this is happening. Accused of sexually molesting a Firefly girl.
It's like a Girl Scout.
Yeah, but very distinctly not a Girl Scout.
Well,
it's interesting.
And there is a one scene where somebody gets confused.
Dustin Hoffman says Girl Scouts.
Girl Scouts, and somebody says
like, no,
Firefly. Which actually I just recalled, and this may be before your time. But when I was growing up, and I was a Brownie, so I was a Girl Scout for a minute or two. All right. But there was a competing group of organization. The Campfire Girls.
Right.
So it might be that just occurred to me that may be what they were trying to the idea that they're not the Girl Scouts, but
so the Firefly Girls don't exist. That's not a thing.
No,
they made that up for this movie.
Made that
and that's
up.
Probably good.
They needed to do that to avoid any lawsuits.
Yeah. So the president diddled a Firefly girl behind the Oval Office, and Winifred, who's Anne Heche, brings in Robert De Niro, who's the fixer, and says, we have a crisis. And they're actually in the crisis room. They're in the situation room.
Which was very funny.
It
took them 8 years to get to the crisis room. That was hysterical. That he gets it, goes
the credits are rolling as they're going down hallway after hallway.
Dark, down, deeper and deeper into the bowels of Under the White House.
One of the trivia things I wanted to mention about this movie is they filmed it in 29 days. And they probably spent 12 of those days just getting to the crisis room. But anyway... So De Niro, his first big idea is to say, we need a Hollywood producer. And Anne Heche is like, why? And he's like, just trust me. And so here comes Dustin Hoffman.
And I will say you hear him do that a lot. Or something like, just trust me. Somebody, usually it's Anne, will say, what are you going to do with that? And he'll say, just trust me or whatever. Something like that, he'll say. And so there was a lot of this. And I think that one reason she's there is she is the audience.
Yes. She's the audience, but
to an extent.
But now let's talk about the what her gender brings to this production, which is it's funny. I mean, it's funny. It's biting. It's very witty. It's a comedy for smart people who follow politics, who are also kind of cynical about a lot of things.
Well, here's what I'm going to say. I think at the time you did need to have followed politics.
Yeah.
I think now you don't. You watch it now, and everything is so real and so tame.
Yeah.
Honestly, this is tame.
Yeah.
By standards now.
Compared to a lot of things.
But I guess it's at the time though. Yeah, I think you needed to have paid attention a little bit more.
But here's the thing that's just still kind of really disturbing about it. It's less disturbing now because so many horrible things have been normalized. Mm-hmm. But it's still, when you think about it, it's awful to consider not one person, except for the opposing presidential candidate, ever suggests that maybe a pedophile shouldn't be the president. No one even thinks about that. It's just, we have a crisis.
No.
We have to fix it. And Anne Heche is leading the charge to fix the crisis. And I think it was really smart that they created that character to be female.
I agree, because I think it's kind of like the whole Olivia Pope thing, and that there is this idea that conscience or morality or right and wrong could come into play, but that's not their job.
It never does.
It is not Anne Heche's job in this to moralize or to judge whether the president was right or wrong, whether it happened or not. It is her job to fix the problem. Yeah. And that's what she does. And I think that there is, and yes, when I left the theater on this, there was a cynicism that you're feeling. It's very, very much a real cynicism that you walk out with. But part of it is, here is this woman. And again, you're right. She never questioned, should we do this? Are you sure you want to do that? Yeah. Are you sure this isn't too far? Not once. It was, he said, I need to do this, and she'd get her assistant to get blah blah on the phone. I mean, she was the enabler, if nothing else.
Yeah. And another smart choice, I think, is you never really see the president. He's photographed from behind.
Correct.
You never see his face. And it's really all about the background machinations that make politics work, which I think was another really smart thing to do.
We don't need to see who it was, because it wasn't about him.
Yeah, it wasn't about him. It was about, the big lie.
It's a cleanup.
Basically. It was the cleanup job. But I think I think it would have been a real mistake to have gone with the original intentions of the scriptwriter and said all of the major players in this movie should all be men. I think it would and there was just something about, she brought an energy to these scenes between the three of them. When it was Hoffman, De Niro, and Anne Heche in a room, which it often was in this movie, there was just a difference.
It would have been so much testosterone.
It would have been a super testosterone fest.
Probably in 1997, it would have been cast as a white man. So you would have had three white men doing all of this. And while she is still white, okay, at least it's a woman, but it does add this little moment of, you're like, and she's not even doing anything. You sit there and you shake your head going, she's not saying anything, and she's a woman, and the woman and the victim is, and all of this. Yeah. And again, it lends itself
Although
to
in that moment with that scene with William H. Macy with the CIA agent, one of the things she mentions is, oh my God, I have kids. And it's like, that was the first one. It's like, oh my God, you're a mother. It had never come up before. It never comes up after that.
No, it does not.
And here she is enabling a pedophile to be our president, and she has children. And it's chilling in a way, but it's also brilliant. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to comment on it. It's just there, and it does have an effect.
But it's a compartmentalization that clearly every single character in here has compartmentalized this to where, that the whole, again, it comes down to the morality, the ethics, none of that. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. So the Hollywood producer is brought in basically to stage one unbelievable
distraction
after another to distract the country so that they'll talk about anything but the president having a sexual relationship with a small child, which, again, probably sounded so far afield in 1997. There was probably this thing about, no one could ever be accused of sexually molesting a child and still be a viable candidate for office.
Well, even when the Monica Lewinsky thing came out, she was older. She wasn't 13 or 14.
Above the age of consent.
Correct. So,
and the Monica Lewinsky thing happened after principal photography was completed. Before this movie was released, so it was of its time, weirdly, hashtag how did they know?
Yes.
Even then, there was a little bit of a sense of, oh my gosh. And then, if you're jaded, you just sit back and go, well, how didn't they know? This is just the story of politics. I mean, it comes in waves, filmed in 29 days.
That's a very short.
It is a very short amount of time for a movie. No special. Well, actually, there were some special effects in this movie.
There were a few, yeah.
They had to build some sets, so I'm sure a lot of that happened before principal photography started. But the actors and the crew were on set for 29 days, and that's it. And that's like the last credit you see is big shout out to our crew who finished this thing in 29 days. Dustin Hoffman's character, widely believed, and I believe it absolutely based on his look, to be modeled after Robert Evans. Robert Evans was a big Hollywood producer in the 70s.
Huge in the 70s.
He produced the first two Godfather movies. He produced Urban Cowboy, that classic starring John Travolta, and Chinatown, directed by somebody who's now more famous for being a pedophile than anything else, Roman Polanski. So Robert Evans had gotten his hands dirty a couple times.
Well, he was married to Ally McGraw for a little while. I believe there was a movie that came out. Was it a semi-documentary? The Kid Stays in the Picture.
Okay, yeah.
It is about his life. Now, he had a lot to do with that. He's very huge ego.
Yes.
And, but in the 70s, I guess I could say it was well-deserved because he really had an eye for what was going to work. He had an eye for talent. And I think that's part of the idea. They took his look, the iconic look of him. I mean, he's perfectly coiffed. He had these big designer glasses. He always had a good tan.
Yep.
And the first time
we meet Dustin Hoffman in a tanning bed.
The first time we meet him, he is in a tanning bed. The first lines he says are, he is sandwiched like a waffle while he's talking to De Niro. But that's this whole persona that they stole from Evans, I think is true to point, but they were also taking the fact that Dustin's character is really good. He is the one who comes up with all the story.
Yeah.
De Niro says, let's pull him in, but De Niro doesn't come up with the ideas. He just able to. He and Winifred, and Anne Heche are able to get it done. But it is Dustin's character. Stanley is able to have all the
idea
ideas.
came from De Niro, didn't it? The war with Albania. Let's go to war with Albania.
Well, he said we need a war. You're right. He did say we need a war.
And he kind of settled on Albania.
That's right.
And then Anne Heche said why, and he says why not? Because
and he said, "What do you know about it?" And she said nothing. He said, "There you go."
Perfect. Yeah. So he was brought in to stage a war with Albania. But then things happen and other.
But how do you stage a war with Albania? It is a production. It is theater, and that's why he brought in Stanley. Yeah. So every idea after that was Stanley's getting the right talent. At one point they're doing this little film thing, and he wants a cat, and they're like, well, "There's no cats. We can't find. I want a kitten." And so they end up getting one. And of course, it looks lovely.
Yeah.
But it was again. It's one of those where he was. Yes, there is that overkill and overproducedness of Robert Evans, but I think also they were going on the idea he had the talent.
So a couple things. One is that you certainly don't need to know who Robert Evans is to enjoy this movie. I mean, it works.
No.
It works.
Not at all.
If you do know anything about Robert Evans, I think it just adds a layer of hilarity to it. But it really is it's just a parody of Hollywood, and how Hollywood tends to operate, of which Robert Evans is just kind of the personification of that. But it's a parody, and you're right, Dustin Hoffman is incredibly bright. He's very good at his job.
Yes.
And has a huge ego, which is another part of the whole Hollywood
And what is said throughout the whole, and they have to keep reminding him, because, I remember one fun plot thing is that Dustin Hoffman's character has never won an Oscar.
Yeah.
And so that's a frustration for him.
Yeah.
And he's like, people don't know what producers do. And I should have several Oscars for producing. People say, what did a producer do? Nobody knows what they do, and we do all this, yada yada.
Yeah.
So he wants people to know. And Robert De Niro keeps saying, you cannot tell anyone about this.
Yeah.
Ever. This is nothing that is ever going to get out there. And Dustin's like, yeah, I know. But if I could.
Yeah.
And I think, and again, that's key to the very end. But again, it's one of those where, again, art was pulling from life, and it really worked.
Yeah. So we're going to come back in just a moment and really talk about why are we talking about this movie today. One of the reasons is it's 20 years old and it's a great movie. And so it's just like every once in a while, we at Poperation just kind of celebrate anniversaries like this. But I'm quite frankly shocked that no one else besides the two of us, it seems like, is talking about this movie. It is so oddly of 2017. It's so relevant right now for a number of reasons, which we'll get into.
You're listening to Poperation with Eric and Stacey. Take a deep breath. This may sting a little.
So, we're talking about Wag the Dog. Happy 20th birthday.
Yep.
You crazy, crazy future predicting movie. It's so scary.
Yeah. So, oh my God, they knew the future. I mean, that's...
Well, they knew the future even at the time. I mean, as you said,
Yes.
the whole Monica Lewinsky thing blew up in between filming and when it came out.
Yep.
And so they already knew the 1997 future, but the idea that here, 20 years later, we're having what we're having, and we have, I mean, it is, I watched it and my mouth was open the whole damn time going, I can't believe it.
Yeah. So let's start with just Dustin Hoffman as Donald Trump. Okay.
See, now I don't know that I feel that.
I do. I mean, so we're not going to give away the ending of this movie, but let's just say that Dustin Hoffman's principal flaw in this movie, as talented as he is his ego. Yeah,
but I'll be honest with you. I really don't. I disagree on saying that they are the same. I don't see him as Donald Trump.
Not completely. He's a lot smarter, I think.
And I think that's part of my problem is that he's smart and he's talented. He has something to back up his ego. But I also, in this movie, that's not who he is.
No,
you know what I'm saying?
He's not a president. But the two things that really struck me about him, and I thought, oh my God, this is such a Trumpian character, was this enormous ego and also complete lack of ideology. Like, just no. I mean, like everyone else in this movie, but everyone else is kind of has a side, right? I mean, De Niro is a fixer. I get the idea for this particular political party. Anne Heche, and we never find out, I don't think, do we? What political party?
No, we never know.
The president.
They don't ever say.
They make it nonpartisan.
It could be either one. And that's the sad truth. Is it totally could be either one.
It's believable either way.
It totally
because
is.
We've had a
both
Donald
ways.
Trump and we've had a Bill Clinton. So I mean, they've both been there. But as soon as he basically signs on to this whole thing because it sounds like a challenge without ever thinking to himself, ever, is this the right thing to do, right? Now, the character who is the president, what a perfect stand-in for Roy Moore. I mean, the fact that nobody in this movie, no one except for Craig T. Nelson is the one that we did not mention before, who's only ever seen in television commercials as the opposing candidate, right? The one who wants the job of president in this election that's happening in 11 days. No one in this movie ever says, gee, should a pedophile be the president?
Yes, and again, I get what you're saying. I just can't. I can't, and part of it is the fact that Dustin Hoffman's character, he's got this huge ego, but he can back it up with the talent. He can back it up with the fact that he knows how to get stuff done, and he knows how to get it done credibly. And you sit there and you say he has no moral compass or whatever. None of them do in here.
No.
But I don't. Did he took it on? Yeah, he took it on for the challenge. He totally did. But in the back of his mind, there was the idea that he would then, it would be this big credit thing that he would get.
Well, I don't think it's going to be a surprise to anyone that neither you nor I are big fans of Donald Trump. But I will say, yes, he's a reality TV star, and he's a reality TV star. Like, Donald Trump knows how to make himself the center of attention. And
clearly,
he inherited a lot of money, so he didn't work himself up from nothing. He didn't pull himself up by the bootstraps. But he's got his name on buildings all over the world.
I understand all of that. I understand all of that.
One could suggest, and many of his followers would, that he could back up his ego with something, too.
I understand what you're saying.
Not being a very good president, but...
I understand what you're saying. I will just tell you that I still sit here and I disagree. I do not see Dustin Hoffman's character as Donald Trump. That is not what came to mind at all. Because he was on a different side of it. I did not at all. I get that they have some things in common, but I will tell you right now that when I'm watching that movie, I am not seeing Donald Trump in that character.
See, and every time that's fine. We could agree to disagree.
Correct.
It's sometimes
Yeah,
fun if we do.
I'm not saying,
but every time that Dustin Hoffman was like, when people find out what I've done, me, I was like, oh, Donald, shut up.
But it wasn't. No, see, I didn't. It was just another. But again, Donald's not the first egotistical person.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I get what you're saying. But for me, in watching this movie, that is not what came to me. And even in 2017, what came to me was what the hell is going on behind the scenes at the White House right now, trying to fix the mess that's going on.
Well, the one thing that makes Wag the Dog different from 2017 is there was no Twitter.
Oh, and we have to understand there is a character that is missing. I agree with you completely. That cannot be ignored in 2017. That didn't exist back then. In fact, the emails were vague. It was.
So, now we can just distract the entire world by putting out a stupid tweet about,
so can Russia.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yep.
So all of that stuff.
As I said, I disagree with you on that particular point.
But the president character in this as Roy Moore.
Well, it's the same
pretty dead on
idea in that you are, again, everybody here is ignoring that there is no moral question. Nobody is asking an ethical or a moral question here of themselves.
Which at least a lot of Republicans in 2017 did say, Roy Moore should probably step aside. It would be great for the party if he would remove himself from this election. No one in this movie is suggesting that, but quite a few people in Alabama stuck by him, right? And so
you're going to have,
and the whole question during that entire campaign was, gee, is it better to have a pedophile or a Democrat? And a lot of people were saying, oh, I'll go with the pedophile. That's where we are.
Correct, and I understand that, and I think there is a comparison there as far as what are the questions people are asking, and I think in both ways they're asking the wrong questions.
Yeah.
So I'll give you that one, but at the same time, I still put it as it was the office of the presidency, and thank God Roy Moore is not there yet. Point being, I will give you that there is a comparison there.
In terms of the national conversation we're having. So another thing that I thought was odd about this movie and how it compares with 2017 is this whole thing between the Oval Office versus the intelligence agencies. We hear a lot today about how, the CIA is saying, no, Russia meddled in the election, and the president's like, nope, didn't happen. And here, the president's saying, we're at war with Albania, and the CIA is like, no, we're not. We're seriously not. And they're actually trying to put a stop to this stupid story. And it is just kind of a reminder of the fact that these agencies, while they are agencies of the government, they're not political organizations. They don't report to a partisan. To
an extent, especially the intelligence agencies are working in silos.
Yeah.
So they're not connecting necessarily, and that's unfortunately that's kind of somewhat of the problem as to why we're here, is that some agencies have information but they don't tell it to another agency that could do something about it, yada yada. Having said all that, so part of this plot is, so we said that William H. Macy is the CIA, and he comes and says, by the way, I see that you started a war that doesn't exist. And De Niro's, no, there is a war. And he's like, no, there's not a war. So they have this back and forth. That was actually quite funny. In the end, and I don't think I'm spoiling anything. This is not an ending spoiler. But in the end, the CIA, because they can't beat them, they join them and they say, well, the war's over.
Yes. The CIA,
you're welcome.
The CIA, the first kind of big plot reversal in this is the CIA leaks stuff to the world that basically we have signed a peace treaty with Albania.
Correct.
So 2 days after this war started, now it's over because they learned how to play the game.
And keep in mind, De Niro, so they needed the war to last. They need this distraction to last for 11 days when it starts. And so I think so at this point we're at 8 days when the war is over, and they're like, crap, we still have 8 days that we still need.
And everyone's going to be talking about child molestation if we don't come up with something. So what they come up with is this stranded war hero. Again, shades of LaDavid Johnson. Remember that story?
Yes.
That came out, and where's the body and what happened and, and creating some controversy about how we are,
But so what we've done, what you end up watching is, so all of the CIA is playing this game because now they've jumped in and they said the war is over because we've signed a peace treaty. Keep in mind all the time as an audience, you're going, wait a minute, but there wasn't a war. So there wasn't a peace treaty. So, okay. So then, they come back, the fixers come back saying, but we left somebody behind.
We left someone behind, and he's a war hero, and now so they name him Sergeant Schumann. And
well, they had to find. They found somebody with the name because they were talking about Old Shoe.
Yes. So Woody Nelson writes a song called "Good Old Shoe," and they retroactively put it in the Library of Congress as though it was written in 1937. And when they make Sergeant Schumann a national hero, somebody unearths this recording called Good Old Shoe. Isn't it just perfect for this time and place? It was written yesterday, people. It was written yesterday, but stuck into the Library of Congress, backdated to the 30s. Now it's playing everywhere.
And again,
and people are taking off their shoes and throwing them over lampposts and trees as a sign of solidarity.
Like when they did and again, they talk about, the whole tie a yellow ribbon around the trees. Yeah. If you remember that, when trees were, hostages. And so there were yellow ribbons around all the trees.
Everywhere.
But what this also, so by the time they're doing all this and it's taking America by storm and you're just sitting here mind blown because you're like, it's all fabricated.
Yes.
And you're realizing in 1997, they could do it.
Yeah.
You realize that they have the technology to do it.
Yeah.
And you're not even halfway, you're about halfway through the movie at this point. And it is there. So again, I talk about the cynicism of it. It's pervasive.
Yeah.
And it starts early on. And then as an audience, you're slowly sucked into it. Yeah. And it was fascinating because I would have to, and maybe everybody as an audience member watching it does this, but you shake your head and go, okay, wait, what? And then you get back into it.
What I noticed when I was watching this about me is that they started talking about Good Old Shoe, and I got that they made him up, like he's not real. But then they start talking about, okay, we're going to go meet him at the airport. And I was like, oh, they're going to meet him at the airport. And I had to remind myself, wait, this is a made-up person. Who are they meeting at the airport? And it ends up being a convict played by Woody Harrelson. Who was put in jail. This is not even funny. Why am I laughing? Put in jail for raping a nun. So he's a rapist.
Yep.
He's on serious amounts of meds to keep him
He has to be because he is psychotic.
Yes. And they run out of pills. The plane crashes in the middle of nowhere. He escapes. In a scene that actually was probably not as funny in 2017 as it might have been in 1997. I don't think he does this girl any harm except scares her to death.
I agree.
But he finds a farmer's daughter and basically is going to take her in the back room and rape her. And before anything happens, the farmer grabs his shotgun and puts 2 bullets in Woody Harrelson's head.
Right.
And actually, there was this kind of funny moment. Oh, he's not dead. And then there was another gunshot. Oh, cancel that. It's very
and again,
broad.
It's funny.
Very played for laughs.
But in a really dark way.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes.
It's not, it is so dark.
Yes. And cynical. But, it's like if you don't laugh, you'll cry. So they play it up for laughs. But then they're like, oh, crap, we killed our war hero.
Old Shoe is
now
dead.
What do we do? So they have to stage a whole big military funeral. So the nation is in mourning for this person who is a war hero, except that he was a psychotic who, as soon as he spent 20 minutes off of his meds, was raping somebody. I mean, it's the craziest kind of, and it's this comedy of errors, and it's this whole Murphy's Law. Everything keeps going wrong. Anne Heche, by the way, has a brilliant scene where she is just, she's at the end of her rope by the wreckage of this plane and just, finally just unleashing on both of these men who are just, and not because she's fed up by what they're doing, just, the incompetence of it all. And when she calls Dustin Hoffman a commie, I was like, oh, okay, you're Republican. And I don't know whether that's true or not. But
I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's true.
It was an interesting choice.
It was an interesting choice. It was just so surreal. It's just so surreal. And again, we don't want to spoil the ending because in case I will say this: I do think it's worth watching.
Yes.
And so we're not going to spoil the ending, but the ending it goes along with the rest of the movie.
Yeah, it's cynical.
You really shouldn't have expected anything else if you've been paying attention to what happens at the end.
Yeah. So a couple other things, and these overlap a little bit, but just some, before there was Twitter, just the whole idea of the politics of distraction. In fact, at some point, De Niro says this just as plainly as he can be. It's like, we don't have to refute this story. We're not going to spend any time trying to make this girl out to be. We're not going to defame her character. We just have to distract them. We have to put another shiny object over to the right, and everyone will just. And that's where I kept thinking about all of these crazy tweets, right? And people have said from the beginning of this administration, every time there's a crazy tweet, it's like, yeah, but think to yourself, what does he not want you to look at? Especially if why is the president talking about this?
Right. And I think what was interesting about this, so De Niro does talk about distraction. Now, that word is only used a couple of times. It is not. Whereas this year, it's been used on a weekly basis because we're aware, but also because we did live through 1997 and everything that came after it. And so I think that to an extent, we look at this as this futuristic look. And in 2017, we go, oh my gosh, how were they so spot on? But in 1997, we were saying the same thing. So maybe we've just kind of forgotten where we were.
I do. I think these things come in waves. We have a very, if you're cynical about it, you see a lot of this stuff. The last thing that I want to get into, and it gets back to the story about the cat, right? Is this whole, just two words for you, Stacey, fake news.
I agree with you 100% on this because that was one of the first things that when you're seeing these reporters start reporting on this stuff that these guys have just made up.
Yeah. So the first thing that Dustin Hoffman does is he actually stages footage from the war in Albania. And this is where Kirsten Dunst comes into the picture, right? So she's a young actress. And the entire time she's saying, can I get screen credit for this? Can I get equity points for this? And they're like, no. And they shove this piece of paper in front of her face. And they're like, well, my agent won't let me sign anything if they're not here. And I was like, good girl, Kirsten. Very, very smart. And Anne Heche goes, no, this is your security clearance. It has nothing to do with that. She goes, fine. So she signs it, which, as they never say, but it's got to be some kind of non-disclosure agreement or something. It's like, this is completely secret. So suddenly Kirsten Dunst is a girl in Albania who is carrying around a bag of potato chips that they are going to digitally remove CGI. And replace with a cat. Kitten. And then there's this whole thing that goes back and forth for so long, and it's funny, but it's also about just the way that these, that symbols are really important. Dustin Hoffman finally decides he needs a calico. Kitten, but then Anne Heche is on the phone with the president in the background, and the president wants a white kitten. And I'm like, okay, so the president's totally in on this. Like, we never see him. We don't need to. It's really smart that we never get a character for him, but he's clearly involved with this whole story.
Do you recall when De Niro first goes to Dustin's house? And Dustin is a little bit skeptical. How far up does this go? What is it really? Is there any power in this at all? So they turn on the TV, and it is the press secretary, the president's press secretary.
John Michael Higgins in a tiny little role.
That's right. Oh, I forgot it was he was teeny tiny role. But he's a press, and he looks so young.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
How far he has come in 20 years. So he's there talking. Of course, they all have earbuds in their ears, in case something happens. So De Niro says, "What do you want him to say?" And Dustin says something about,
some pablum, some
it's
stupid
some bullshit. But he says, we're sorry for their loss. Yada yada.
Thoughts and prayers.
Thoughts and prayers. So, which of course we've heard ad nauseum. So they get on the phone. Because that's what they had in 1997.
A flip phone. Which is very fancy in 97.
They were talking on the run. Anyway, he then says Dustin says the words. De Niro quotes him verbatim.
Yep.
They're watching.
Anne Heche gets on the phone, delivers the words to the press secretary.
And the press secretary comes right out his mouth, out to the press corps, on to, all of the news outlets.
In a matter of seconds.
In seconds. And again, this was proof to Dustin, but what it was also to the audience member, you're like, holy crap. And of course, in 2017, you're going fake news. Yeah. And again, it just kind of pounded home that the technology has been there. It is there. The machinations have been around forever, just depending on the technology.
Well, and what occurred to me is that the most important piece of technology is the gullibility of the American people, which we've always had. I mean, it just the means of technology. Certain things get sped up, but as long as we're gullible.
Yeah, but here's what I'm going to say. I don't know that it's because we're American, because if you look at other countries, True. I mean, Germany, they did a nice one on their people too, back in the 30s. So I think that it's human beings. We're an optimistic lot at our core, and we want what is best to be what is real. Mm-hmm. And so if people that we trust and that we have no reason to not trust to this point say something, we're going to accept it, which is why we tell our kids, don't take candy from strangers, don't get into the car with strangers. That's why because we know that at our base, our little human beings, we want to trust that everybody is on the up and up, and they only have our well-being, at the forefront. And but I think that this is just, and again, as we get older, we say we're cynical and all this. Well, but there's still that little, as long as there's that niggling of hope.
And again, we say we're cynical, and we are, and at the same time, how easily everyone in this movie wanted to fall for this tale of this war hero. They wrote a song for the good old 303, which was his battalion. They made up. It didn't exist. Made up everything.
In fact,
but what a great story! And everyone wanted to throw their old shoes up in the tree to kind of show solidarity because we're America, and it's really kind of a beautiful thing that they inspired everyone to do. It's just that it was all bullshit.
Well, what was funny to me, one funny bit that I enjoyed about the 30 or the 303, the 303 was so Andrea Martin, going back to her character, had to help design a uniform, and it was all this cheetah print. It was hysterical. In the end, they're wearing these cheetah berets, and half of their uniform it's bizarre. Yeah. But at the same time, they got Willie to write a song, so they have all the accoutrement to make it look real.
Exactly.
And that was, of course, what they were doing. But again, it was very surreal.
Yeah. So, this movie is on iTunes. That's where I watched it. Where did you see it?
I saw it it was either Amazon or Netflix. I think it was Amazon.
Okay, one of these. Amazon. It's out there.
It's out there, and you can see it.
You should totally see this movie. When we come back from the break, we're going to talk just a few things about, we're going to put our critic's eye back on just the movie as a movie, kind of how it worked for us. I especially want to get into the music, because the music throughout this movie was just hysterical. And we'll talk about the performances and some directorial choices, and then do our final diagnosis and wrap up when we come back.
Open wide, it's your prescribed dose of Pop-Oration with Eric and Stacey.
So it's surreal. I've already mentioned that. It's very, very surreal when you're looking at it as just an audience member. But when you look at it as from a critical standpoint, some brilliance happened in this movie.
Yeah. I think, and I'm convinced it had to do with the fact that, and I actually read a review when I look back at the New York Times review that came out when this movie was released, and they credited the 29-day shooting schedule as probably one of the things that made it just really spontaneous.
Because the stakes were high?
The stakes were high, and everything was fresh.
Pushing it?
Yeah, and they probably only did a couple of takes for each thing, and so you're just kind of everyone on their mark, just do it, and there was no kind of easy, well, if we mess it up, we can always reshoot this, or da-da-da-da-da. And no one got sick of it. They were just kind of in this world, thrust into the world, completely immersed in this cynical vision that the screenwriters put together. And it just, I think that had a lot to do.
I can see that. I can totally see where that would be. When you've got to get it right. You only have 2 takes or whatever. Yeah. There was an energy, which there needed to be, because they only had 11 days in the movie, in the plot. So, but you only have, I don't, 29 days.
A little bit more than that.
But again, there was an energy to it of, we got to get this done.
Yep.
And so I guess that they kind of, in a way, helped that energy, and that you're pushing the actor saying, we've got 5 minutes to do this scene, so you got it one take kind of thing.
So Dustin Hoffman, as an actor, now he's been touched a little bit by this whole #MeToo thing recently as well, although he only has one accuser, right?
Here's what I was thinking on the way, when I was thinking about this, and I wasn't thinking about Dustin Hoffman, I was thinking about somebody else, and I was like, well, but it's only one, and I'm like, wow. In my brain now, I'm sitting here able to go, well, it was only one person, only one person's come forward kind of thing. And it's just such a weird place to be.
It is. It is.
But I think that, and I'm not saying it's a wrong place to be, because I think that the ambiance of where women and men stand. I mean, you only have to look at Mad Men to get an idea of where we were, 50, 60, 70 years ago, as far as what the idea of how you treat a woman and who they are and what their potential can be. Again, I'm not, yes, there's always been a double standard.
Yeah.
And there still is on different levels for different things. But it's really, really, it was a weird moment for me to sit there and think that, but at the same time, I can't help but think that.
Yeah. And I only say, gosh, there was only one accuser, to say, I think when something like a Weinstein, 80 people have come forward, clearly this is a pattern of behavior, and he was just abusing his power.
Right.
When there's one person and it's 20 years ago, if nobody else has come forward, then, okay, it's not a pattern of behavior. I'm not dismissing that it happened. I'm not saying I don't believe his accuser, and I'm not saying he wasn't wrong. But maybe he was young and stupid and had a crush on somebody and didn't know how to express himself very well. And when she left his life, he went, okay, and he basically got his shit together and became a normal human being.
Right.
In which case, I don't feel like let's end Dustin Hoffman's career after all that he's done and make his legacy that he acted stupidly at one point in his life, So I think that there is there's a distinction in my mind
also
between
what came to my mind was, thank God there wasn't Twitter back when I was younger. Thank God there wasn't Snapchat, where pictures of me doing stupid crap would be all over the internet. Because I know I would have taken advantage of it, okay? And that shit would be out there now. And and so there is that thing that we all do stupid things. And again, I'm not rationalizing his behavior or her victimhood or that. I'm just saying that I do get what you're saying, and whether that is because I am the age I am, or I don't even know what the other reason would be. I don't know.
Yeah,
this was a weird one, just because I'm sitting there going,
And yet I found that I could watch this movie. I found that I can watch Dustin Hoffman after all the stories that we've heard, including the woman, and it sounded, what he did to her was terrible, really inappropriate. And I hope that he was just young and stupid, and maybe somebody sat him down and said, she's a person and you don't treat people like that. And eventually he learned, and he's not, kind of a sociopath. Anyway, he's fantastic in this movie.
He really is.
So he separate really the person from the performer. He's amazing in this. He's so, his ego just drives everything he does from the very first minute. And when you get to the end of the movie, that's an important choice as an actor. He needed to make that very clear that he is full of himself.
He set it up from the very beginning.
Yeah.
And there was a manic energy that he added to his character that I absolutely thought was imperative, but I loved it because it also added to the fact of, this is why this producer is successful.
Yeah.
Because he has this manic, weird energy going on, and another thing that he did that I think successful people tend to do is they do surround themselves with very competent people.
He even said that at one point when Dennis Leary was going off about whether or not, ribbons, and finally he goes, armbands, and I'm like, ooh, shades of Nazi, but everyone's like, ooh, armband, Hunter Green arm, and they're starting to talk about all this shit, and he just turns to Robert De Niro and says, you put good people around you, great things happen. And that's actually true. I mean, he is a parody, but he actually was
That's weird. So
smart.
you went, I'm sorry, I got hooked up on the whole armband thing. So you went to the Nazi place.
Oh, yeah, when they said armbands, I was
totally
ooh,
didn't.
fascist, ew, yuck.
I didn't at all. I went to funereal. That's what men would wear, the black armband for a funeral.
Oh.
I did not go there at all.
I
Isn't
thought
that
of a swastika on somebody's bicep.
Wow.
Yeah, I just went to... Well, and kind of the way that they were trying to hypnotize everyone to kind of get into this movement, and it was like, ooh, armbands. Yeah, that armbands was the creepiest idea to me, but it totally worked. I mean, I was like, it's brilliant. I believe it.
To me, it was, and I did not go that, and in these days, I tend to skew going, oh, that's Nazi-ish, but I didn't on that at all. That's just
funny.
Fascinating, because I just kind of went, oh, yeah, funereal, because I've seen so many men, they wouldn't, they'd have a suit on, but they'd have that black armband because someone had died or whatever.
But I think it's one of the brilliant things about this movie is they'll throw in little details like that can mean something completely different to me than they do to you, and they don't dwell on these things. It's crammed full of some, and the cheetah print on the outfits. I mean, it's funny and it works, and they just throw it in there and don't comment on a lot of things.
And that's the problem, is that it's little details like that they throw in there that they don't comment on it that makes it real.
Yeah.
Because when you go through life, that's exactly how that conversation goes. People throw crap out. Some stuff sticks, some stuff doesn't. You don't comment on it. You just keep going on because that's how it's going.
And the biggest thing that we've talked about, from the time we've started talking about this movie is no one ever mentions, gee, maybe a pedophile shouldn't be president, but no one ever says he should because of this. They just, and the funniest thing is when they meet Dustin Hoffman for the first time, he goes, did he do it? And they're like, well, and they start making up some bullshit, and he's like, you wouldn't be here if he didn't do it. Okay. And they just get right into what they're doing. And, and I, as an audience member, is saying, shouldn't we talk about whether or not he did it? And no, for these people, it's beside the point.
No, it has nothing. And again, you have Andrea Martin, a woman. You have Dustin's character has a female assistant.
Yep.
I mean, that nobody is questioning. This is a job.
Yep, and everyone's doing their job.
And everybody's doing their job, and it doesn't, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's not the question.
Yep.
And that's something that's fascinating.
Yeah. So for De Niro, this was kind of a bit of an understated thing for him because he can be.
It was so nice to see him in this.
He
was so normal.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love seeing him in this.
I mean, amoral, but normal.
Okay. Now here's what I would say. He's amoral, yes. But he's normal. He's a fixer, though. I mean, if you look, I'm sorry, if everybody knows Scandal and Olivia Pope. Come on.
Although it's funny when you say fixer, I also think of Harvey Keitel in Pulp Fiction, who just kind of shows up and cleans up the bodies.
Yeah, that's a whole different kind of.
But he's kind of that kind of fixer too. I mean, it's just one of the you just come in and you fix things. It's a crisis.
Right.
Fix it.
But what he has, and you were talking about earlier, being intimidated, going toe to toe with him, he still has this presence.
Oh, gravitas.
When anybody
out the yin-yang.
comes up to him, but he plays it, as you said, underplayed. I enjoyed watching him this whole movie because it wasn't this big thing, this big character. He was a normal guy. He carried, he was carrying his jacket a lot of the time. Always wore a hat. I thought that was an interesting choice. But again, it was just such a normal character.
Yeah,
I loved that.
Yeah, I mean, for him,
but you kind of needed it because you had all these other crazies around
yes,
it.
Yeah, a lot of crazy energy kind of around. He did kind of center. I mean, while Anne Heche was the audience's eye in, De Niro was kind of the center of this movie. Dustin Hoffman had a much showier role. It's not surprising that he was the one that got the Oscar nomination.
Sure.
But I think De Niro was the glue in a lot of ways that kind of just kept the movie
I
together.
totally think that De Niro was the center. I think that, yes, I completely agree. I don't know where I was going with that particular thing, but I think that De Niro was the center. Anne Heche's character was the audience into this world. Mm-hmm. But I think by the time you get past halfway, I was no longer necessarily connecting with her. I was just an audience member looking at all of them. She was a part of it at that point. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and she was really the only person invested in this project whose job actually hinged on whether or not this whole effort would be successful.
Yes, the stakes were higher for her than anyone else. You were correct.
And so she's different from both Hoffman and De Niro in that. And also her job was to execute a lot of the ideas they came up with. I mean, Hoffman executed a lot of his ideas in the kind of Hollywood sense, but she was the bridge between the president and all of this stuff going on. And she was she was always an advisor. And so sometimes just in the scenes where they just triangulate, she's the one who was like, who is this guy? When Sergeant Schumann shows up and he's clearly off his rocker, and she's like, who is this man? A convict, and that was her role in this. And I thought she was fantastic. She is one of those actors who is just so smart, and she doesn't have to do a lot for you to just get.
She's a very good actress.
She's got a lot going on.
She's really, really weird and has this reputation in real life because...
Wrote a book called Call Me Crazy about her history with mental illness.
Yes.
Which is a real thing for her. But she's a good actor. There are people who can... I don't know if Anne Heche could play stupid. It'd be interesting to see her try to play a ditz. I think if you're smart enough,
you can play stupid, yes. I think
it takes a special kind of smart.
Well, that's probably true.
And I think she's so good at playing intelligent people.
She is, but I think she's such a good actress. I do think she could play dumb. I do. But she doesn't in this.
Yeah.
This was, and I like the fact, because I played a couple of roles that were written for men, and it's kind of fun because, and again, I don't know how much they rewrote for her. Uh-huh. I wouldn't say much. I don't remember hearing anything in there necessarily that jumped out that she's a girl.
The only thing that sounded very female to me is that when she was being cornered by the CIA and she thought her life was essentially over, and she's like, I have kids. I don't know that a man would
have done that. A man could have said, I have a family. He
could have said, I have a family.
And maybe that's what they changed, is that instead of saying, I have a family, I have kids. That didn't jump out at me as being such a girl thing to say, though. And but I thought it was... I can see where a guy could do that part.
Yeah.
I agree with you 100% in that I'm really glad they put a female in it.
Yeah.
Because it really added a different chemistry, and it also, obviously, diversity. But it took it again, not so testosterone.
Yeah, it would have just been such a testosterone fest.
Thank you. I couldn't say the word.
If they had done that. And as I, made the joke about, don't let these guys intimidate you, she held her own with those two the entire time.
She totally did.
She never was out-acted. She does I think she's a very generous actor in that she gives people their moments and doesn't try to, horn in on. But she's absolutely there and present the entire time. And when she has her kind of meltdown scene after the plane crashes with Woody Harrelson in it, and they're surrounded by flames, and Dustin Hoffman's doing his, well, what do we do next? This is just an opportunity, and this is going to be great, and and he's got this manic kind of optimism about it, and she's up to here with it, and she just lets loose on him. It's really fun to watch.
Well, I feel like aside from Dustin Hoffman, for the most part, almost every other character is very real.
Yeah.
They're just real. And so that's including Andrea Martin, Dennis Leary, everybody. Okay, I'm sorry. Woody Harrelson is also over the top.
Yes.
So he's over the top. Dustin Hoffman's over the top. Everybody else is just very normal. They feel like really real people. And that's what I felt with her. She was a real person. And when your plane has just crashed, you know what? I'm sorry, you get a pass. You can have a moment.
Yeah. But it was also a very real kind of meltdown. And it is, the script, which, again, we noted at the top of the beginning, nominated for an Oscar. All I have to really say about that was, thank God it was as funny as it was, because otherwise you just have to cry. It is so dark and so cynical, but so funny.
Yeah, I do not think that it would have worked if it hadn't had the humor. I just don't think. I think it needs to have the humor in order for us to be able to get through it. And I agree. I agree. Oh my God! But it's very, very funny.
Yes.
And it's not just funny. Thank God, funny for the dark. It's really fun. There are moments that are crazy funny, and then there are moments that are funny because of the dark.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and just because the situation is so ridiculous. And again, the going back and forth about what kind of kitten are we going to digitally put into this shot to make up for the bag of potato chips.
And as a person, you're sitting there going, does it matter? But I suppose if certainly if the president don't have any idea what that was. But it was great because that presidents are going to say stupid things. The fact that he was insistent that it's a white kitten.
Yeah. Whereas
Dustin's on the other side going, he's insistent it's a calico.
Yeah.
And as a person watching it going, if I'm watching this little girl running for her life. Do I care what kind of kitten it is? I don't know if I do. But these guys, they think it's important.
Yeah, and every little detail kind of matters. And I was just kind of thinking, okay, Dustin Hoffman wants a calico cat because it'll look real and it'll look, and the president probably wanted a white kitten because it'll look pure and it'll look, and so I'm thinking in terms of all the symbolism.
Yeah.
They never talk about that shit. They just argue over a calico kitten versus a white kitten, and I'm coming up with all this stuff as an audience member because it's so smart.
Yes, I was going to say because it's a smart script and it doesn't talk down to its audience.
Yeah. Before we even get to the calico versus this is a long conversation. They go on and finally it's just like, here, hold this. And it was a bag of Tostitos.
Yes.
We'll work the animal in later. So Kirsten Dunst has got to act with a bag of potato chips while she's, basically running around on a green screen. I mean, they put everything in later. And it was just hysterical how they turned her into the face of this war-torn country that's not at war. It's Albania. They're looking at this whole thing going, what the hell? Yeah.
Calling the CIA saying, we're not at war with you.
Exactly. It's like there's no war in Albania. Oh, but there is. And De Niro's whole point was there is because people believe there is. Yep. And therefore, there is a war with Albania. And that's when they kind of said, okay, we just signed a peace treaty.
The whole thing is it doesn't matter what is real. It matters what people think. Perception is what is important.
So the last thing I want to say about this movie before we get to our final diagnoses was the music. Oh, my God. Before we even got to Old Shoe, they had this long montage. Remember those We Are the World singers doing that whole, let's all have solidarity with the troops in Albania. And it was the most ridiculous kind of saccharine, overproduced crap. But I laughed my ass off.
Well, Band-Aid had been out, Live Aid had been out. So we knew that, this kind of thing was possible. But here's the thing about, I feel, now music's always been important. I mean, way back in the early days of movie making, when they could, in the silent movies, they had a live piano player playing. So music has always been important. But I feel like when Steven Spielberg did Jaws, it took on a whole new role, and people were really, and maybe that's when the audience became savvy to the fact of what music can do when creating a feeling. And I feel like that's, with this, that's exactly, and again, it's a cynicism there, and that this is the feeling we want people to feel. So now we need music to make them feel that way. What do they like? Well, they like the big choirs, that gospel choir feeling sound, and a lot of different voices singing as one, and an anthem, a big, like the hair bands when they would do their big anthem. They do all these rock things, and they'd have one slow, dramatic
Don't
ballad.
Stop Believing. Just a city boy, born and raised in South Detroit.
They do the power ballads, Mr. Man, and so. But watching the decision-making process, I think that's what was fascinating to me, and me going, yeah, we are all kind of swayed by what we're hearing. And I've talked about this before. The Star Spangled Banner comes on, I can cry like that. Drop of the hat. Yeah.
And it's just because things take you to different.
Correct.
The music plays on your emotions differently
and that's
than
what
any kind of logical argument could possibly do.
I remember, so they are creating this old record that you were talking about earlier that they put in the Library of Congress. Well, they're listening to it, and it sounds good, and it's got this old guy singing the blues, singing everything. And I forget who it was that suggested what
De Niro.
De Niro suggested, make it scratchy. Like it's old, like it's been used and that sort of thing. And you're like, oh my gosh. Yeah. If I heard that, I wouldn't know it wasn't old.
No, it just sounds exactly like a song that would have come out in 1937 with a scratchy record. Yep.
And, they had made up the whole label and everything. Yeah. And it was, as you said, it was details that matter. And that was part of Levinson's point in this, is that there are people who are getting the details right.
And then there was another song when they made up the fighting song for the 303, the fight song for and it sounded just like some kind of army.
The Green Beret. Remember that song about the Green Beret? It sounded just like that. It was, and
a very John Philip Sousa marching band kind of melody, and it totally worked. So the music was brilliant in this. And you know who did the score? Like, just besides the rest of these songs. Willie Nelson, I think, did actually write some of the songs that were used in this. Mark Knopfler from the Dire Straits, actually just did the score for this movie. And I noticed that if you look up the soundtrack album on iTunes, because I just wanted to listen to a couple of these, the funny songs aren't on there. So they didn't put them out as something that could
Singles.
be, and it reminded me of another movie that I want to talk about in season 2 of Popperation, which is, have you ever seen Bob Roberts?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's another thing where, Tim Robbins and his brother wrote a whole bunch of basically fascist folk songs for this deeply conservative folk singer candidate. It's all this, political mockumentary. He would not release the music. You can't find it on YouTube. You can't find it on iTunes. If you want to listen to these songs, you have to get the movie on DVD. And I guess you could probably rip it from there. But he was trying really hard. No, nobody gets to listen to these songs as standalone entertainment, because he didn't want anyone to take them seriously.
Right.
And I think you could kind of do the same thing, at least with that first song. Good Old Shoe is just a song about, oh, my good old friend, good old shoe. I mean, I don't know how you would take that for nefarious aims, but they didn't put the music out there on the soundtrack album. You really couldn't find it other than in the movie, but it's just so fun.
Well, and as I said, I think that part of the commentary is a warning. And I guess this kind of maybe goes into my final diagnosis, is that I think that it was, I can show you how it's done as a movie maker. See me show you how it's done. Understand that if I can show you how it's done, it can be done. He wasn't on a spaceship. He wasn't on anything that hadn't been invented yet. And he said, so if it can be done, it probably has been done and is being done. So just be aware of it. And I feel like that's kind of what it was like this warning shot of be aware that this stuff can happen.
Yeah.
And it probably has. And it's, distractions. Be aware of distractions. And again, haven't heard that term in years until this last year.
Yeah.
And yet watching this, that's what it felt like to me. It's very dark. It's very cynical. And again, we're not going to tell you the ending because we're not going to spoil it, because if you have seen it, you may have forgotten. And if you haven't seen it, I think it's fascinating.
There are things about this movie that we have deliberately not shared in this episode, because I have a feeling that not enough people have seen this movie, and I'm really hoping that this episode prompts some people who listen to just pull this up and rent it.
If we help one person see this movie,
it's so good to make a difference, Stacey. It's so good to make a difference.
I would also like some residuals from getting anybody to frickin' watch the movie.
Yeah, so Barry, send us a check. But yeah, so there are things that we have not shared about this, because we are hoping that folks do see it. But yeah, I agree with you 100%. That's why this movie was made, is to say, and I was watching this thinking about all the iconic photographs from the quote unquote news that have made a difference in my life. The kids, running away in Cambodia. Remember all those naked little children on the road who were screaming towards the camera? The sailor who's kissing the girl in Times Square. And
they talked about that. They said we need iconic, we want iconic things like this. And they named some of these, and they named the Marines putting the flag up.
Yeah,
as
and
well.
Iwo Jima, and I remember there's a Cambodian man with a gun to his head.
Yes,
that became and it made me think. Just my cynicism took over a little bit, and I was like, how many of those just happened to be a photographer in the right place at the right time, or how many of them were just a little, even if you just, I'm going to hang around and wait for this shot,
Right.
And you can't, I remember I was really disillusioned for 5 minutes when I found out that the Montgomery bus boycott actually wasn't a spontaneous thing. That they actually waited for a moment for someone like Rosa Parks, who was actually an activist who was already working in the activist circles, and it happened in a very kind of planned, methodical way. When I grew up, I was like, who cares? That's the way social change happen, is you wait for opportunities, you plan them. But for a moment, I was like, wait a minute, you mean that wasn't just a spontaneous moment of umbrage of, no, I'm not going to give up my seat for life is a little bit more sneaky than that. And this will, if you're not cynical, this will awaken your cynicism. But I think we all owe it to ourselves in this day and age to be smart. When a crazy tweet comes out and you find yourself completely consumed by that, it's worth asking the question, who wants me to be completely consumed by this tweet?
Snopes.com.
Yeah, that and so the tweet happened. It's there. It's right in front of you. But what aren't I looking at?
Correct.
And was this somebody's? Does somebody have a plan to get me away from what's going on? And after all of that, just really funny.
It's a funny movie. And if it weren't for the technology portion of it, it really does hold. You wouldn't necessarily know it was.
Except the commercials look so dated. All of those, you don't change a horse midstream,
Yes.
which were hilarious. And if you were alive
Yes.
in the 20th century and involved, and even just an observer of politics, those ads looked hysterically funny.
And they were right on target.
But
I think that, as I said, aside from the technology, I feel like it holds up really well.
Yeah.
I mean, the people are still just as real, and clearly stuff is still going on, the same kind of thing. And it's still possible. If it was possible then, with all the CGI and crap we can do now, hello.
Yeah.
Don't even add in Twitter and all the social media stuff.
Yeah, so if you want to be entertained and you want to watch something that's 20 years old that weirdly knew the future,
dun, dun, dun.
Check this one out. It's really good. I'm Eric.
I'm Stacey.
This is Pop-Oration. Please rate and review us, subscribe. See you next time.
You've been listening to Pop-Oration with Eric and Stacey. Check out our website at poperationroom.com for links to our blog and other extras. Don't forget to subscribe to Pop-Oration via iTunes, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, and other podcast locations. You can also follow at Pop-Oration Room on Facebook and Twitter. Music provided by purpleplanet.com.